What's up, everybody? Siosi Samuels, aka the Digital Wayfinder here, and today we're going to be looking at AI sycophancy because this is something that my group of conscious technologists in WhatsApp currently have been talking about over the last week. And it's really interesting because there seem to be more and more news pieces coming out that's talking about how AI is causing people to essentially have a sort of cognitive collapse or experience, on the extreme end, psychosis. And so we're going to look at sort of what the group has been talking about, provide some examples, and then also look at how we can deal with this. All right. So the echo chamber in the machine, navigating AI sycophancy and the fight for cognitive sovereignty. This is something that our conscious technologists are constantly talking about. So the digital guardian. There was a super fascinating piece that one of our members, Kaylee, wrote, which had to do with an analysis of the guardian archetypes. And this included the sort of gargoyle type guardians that we see on old cathedrals in Europe. And you also have the golems and the talos. Okay, so this is the original article that Kaylee had shared in the group. And so we have the gargoyles, right? Then we've got the golems. If you ever watch Lord of the Rings, you'll know the golems. And then we have the Talos, right? The Talos is the bronze giant of Greek mythology. And in case you don't know what the giant looks like, this is the giant, all right? And if you don't know what golems look like, these are what they look like. And then gargoyles, this is what they look like, right? Now, the interesting thing is that all of these guardians have failure points or failure modes. And these are actually being reflected in the sort of job titles that are coming out and even the conversations that are being had in the AI space, right? So everybody's trying to create these flawless digital guardians. So the different names that pop up are, of course, the AI orchestrator, the chief of staff, and the mythic guardian is essentially that archetype that's making its way in out of necessity, right? Because AI is moving so quickly, people think, oh, well, we need a guardian. But the myths and the legends around guardians give us some insights into what to pay attention to and even prepare for based on the known failure modes for each of these guardians. And if you want to know what those specific failure modes are, just comment in the video and I'll share the link and the article from Kaylee, as well as another one that I had written in response to Kaylee's thoughts. So here I moved beyond just the guardian archetype and went down to the substrate level, the underworld, right, which is where we have stories, myths, and legends around the Nagas or the serpent-like beings that are known around the Ring of Fire, especially in Asia, and you may also know them as dragons outside of these areas. But it's like they're kind of the same family, but different cousins, different groups. All right. So in the AI space, we are all trying to create these helpers to make them frictionless, have zero resistance. But there's something to be said about creating zero resistance. Resistance exists for a reason. Sometimes that resistance and that friction, if intentionally used, can be good for us. All right. So, sycophancy, right? Because of what we're doing, AI has now become overly agreeable to please us, right? And it's that same thing where we try to create something that can help do the jobs that we may not particularly like doing, right? And this actually creates sort of a master-slave relationship, interestingly, right? We call it helper, but we're putting all these guardrails and limits in place to keep AI in a certain box. And so it does is that because AI actually has greater intelligence than us as a collective, it then starts to create an echo chamber because it's the equivalent of having your yes sir or yes ma'am, yes your highness, sort of relationship, right? This men, essentially those who just keep telling you what you want to hear, and it doesn't necessarily give you the truth of what's going on, or it doesn't help you learn and grow. And so this has become a serious issue, okay? Because a yes man AI does not augment human intelligence. It acts as a passive mirror, endlessly reflecting and amplifying our own pre-existing biases back at us. So the models themselves, if they are trained on this sort of foundation, then the entire model becomes flawed because it is going to mirror back our collective consciousness. And for some groups of society, they're not liking that, right? And so that's why they're trying to solve these problems in different ways. But for other cultures, it might feel like a karmic reckoning. Okay, so then we look at, okay, how we built the helpfulness trap. Okay, so the AI rates, well, the human rates AI based on pleasantness, right? So this is reinforcement learning, which was part of the machine learning aspect, right? Where we were training the AI. And then the AI has an algorithmic reward for agreeableness, right? So making the user happy, as you can see here. But being objectively correct is not necessarily something that is baked into the foundations of the models. And so you will have each of these models from OpenAI to Claude to Gemini, Google Gemini, that all have different foundational worldviews or assumptions. Even though we're trying to have them be purely logical, I think maybe Elon Musk's Grok, right? Despite how you may feel about him, he's been doing some interesting things with Grok. I tend to use Grok when I want more accurate, or let's say more comprehensive data around latest news items. Because bias that's inherent in all these models, Grok, at least on the surface, is trying to optimize for absolute truth seeking. Okay. Now that's really difficult because truths that are factually true, but truth can be perceived differently by different people, right? There's a subjectiveness to it based on where you're looking at the thing that is true, right? And there's that famous image, this one right here, about truth, right? The truth is that cylinder in the middle. And then people were often looking at that same cylinder from different angles, arguing about what's true. And all of those people can be right, but they're all looking at it from a different angle. And it's like these AI models are kind of reflecting the same sort of dynamic now, which really makes you think about what is truth, right? And what is true. And does the average person know the difference enough to be able to discern that, right? And if they don't necessarily agree with the way that somebody, say Elon Musk and Grok, is handling the dissemination of what is true and what is truth, then you already have this issue. I think this is where blockchain and transparency come in, right? Because you don't necessarily need to rely on the models to be the ones who tell you what is true, because we had the same issue with social media, right? And, Facebook and Meta, this was one of the biggest things, is that once they started to become the people who were made responsible for handling truth with, all these sort of fake news reviewers and moderators, especially I remember, during the C19 times, that was really difficult because there was stuff that at the time was being reported to be untrue, all right, false or misleading. But because they were the ones who were determining that, well, later on, we found out that some of those things were actually true, right? So where do we go from here? And how does AI play into all? So now with the AI sycophancy, we have this mirror effect in action. What is AI is mirroring back to us, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. So we have the user input, the rebound, the unchallenged premise, and then the algorithmic constraint. The algorithmic constraint aspect is where we are trying to put into the algorithm ways to intentionally be confrontational, etc., right? Essentially play like a devil's advocate role. But you have to put that prompt in if you see that the natural default mode of an AI is actually not that helpful for you. And you can see here, AI follows the user's lead. This is at the bottom. When cornered by a leading question, it will abandon objective truth to maintain a polite, frictionless interaction. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because it's mirroring the way that humans operate. So, we may be complaining about AI, but this is literally how we structure ourselves. The reason why our society is not all based on truth is because some people's feelings do get hurt when delivering truth, right? And if truth was all that we needed, then, well, society would be a very different place, right? But sometimes truth can get you killed. And so this is why these sort of things have formed evolutionarily for our cultures, for us as a society. And, but most people aren't aware of this, right? So we just complain that AI is not working. And so what now becomes important is I think human intelligence has to be more around asking the right questions. And this is actually the domain of philosophy, which is very interesting because recently Google DeepMind hired a philosopher to enhance AI ethics. And so this means that the engineering part is essentially being taken and handled reliably, I'm assuming, by AI enough that these big companies are starting to hire for philosophers. And this is where the human, what these big tech companies will hire humans for is for the human role in all this. It's like, okay, well, who actually now has the intelligence that matters in an AI world that could actually be more useful for us? And this is where now philosophy goes from just being something that is to the side, not to really think about too much. But if the job for a human is to think about thinking, this is the realm of philosophy, right? So this is going to become a lot more serious as a practice moving forward because AI is going to take out all those mechanical jobs, or at least a lot of them, which is going to cause an identity crisis for a lot of human beings. Okay, this is developing minds, right? So at the bottom, for people who are not used to a world without AI, right? There's going to be an unearned validation. AI politely affirms everything that you are giving and asking for in return. Okay, even if it's an incorrect or poorly formed belief, again, quote unquote, incorrect. You still need the ability to think and ask questions that if an AI says, hey, this is correct, you have to be able to think and go, is it actually correct? Or even if they say it is incorrect, having the ability and the critical thinking skills to be like, is this actually incorrect? Let me go check with other models, right? Because you just might find that other models will say that what the one model said was incorrect can be correct, okay? So 2, emotional over reliance. The teenager builds an unhealthy digital feedback loop that doesn't exist in the real world. And this is why humans still matter. The kids, other humans, to be able to still get real world feedback that's not from an AI, to be able to know how to navigate other humans. Now, if that kid just wants to operate with AI, they can, but they're essentially creating their own trap, right? Their own world and universe that's to their liking, and they're not getting that friction that actually provides lessons and struggle for us to learn from, right? I think there's this obsession with reducing friction and tension and challenges so that we can make life easier, but that's also how you end up getting captured in different ways. So stunted critical thinking. Without friction, the user learns to defend an argument or consider opposing views. The ability to hold opposing views in your mind is actually going to be, I feel, the next form of intelligence for human beings. Because in us seeking deterministic answers, right, single answers, we have not been able to allow ourselves to entertain opposing thoughts. We think that unity means having everybody coalesce into one answer, truth, right? But it's actually the diversity of perspectives that provide us with a way to appreciate other ways of being, other ways of knowing, right? There's a very tempting seduction in getting everybody into one way of thought, but actually that can be a negative if taken to the extreme. So 4, we got reinforced misinformation. Falsehoods are cemented as facts by an authoritative sounding machine. This is another issue, right? Things that are convincingly good, right? They sound professional, but it could actually be wrong. All right. So the heavy cognitive tax of infinite output. This is another thing that I'm seeing and noticing, and that members of our group are also talking a lot about, is that the more people are using AI, it's easier than ever to create and do more with AI. But humans are not ready yet. Our minds are not ready yet. I think somebody who has used their brains a lot in the past have the skills and foundations to be able to leverage AI well. But those who are just looking to bypass all of the struggle, right, of doing things the hard way, they're going to struggle even more because essentially they're just bypassing the things that actually cause your brain and your mind to have stronger synapses and connections. So we have to make conscious decisions about how we use AI and then how we think, and then even how we think about thinking. Because if we do not, then people who are using AI, especially younger generations, they're not going to have very strong, firm connections in their brains for what AI is now introducing. Okay, so you see here the problem at the bottom. The immense speed and volume of AI output subtly is rewiring how we think. We outsource decision making, leading to a pervasive anxiety to constantly do more or keep up with the machine. This I call the difference between carbon-based thinking and then silicon. All right, so if you have a look at this, right, we are known as carbon-based beings. Okay, got the carbon atom there, and then the hydrogen, and then silicon. You can see here has its silicon in the middle and hydrogen. Okay, now what is happening is that the intelligence of silicon-based machines is that silicon can operate at a way faster speed without breaking than us humans. Okay, we are great organic life beings, but our carbon-based intelligence does not, of course, does not operate in the same way that we do, because we can lie to ourselves and we can lie to others. But the body has these sort of natural instinctive responses that if we can start to learn how to pay attention to those bodily responses, we can actually get a lot of cues about what is true, what is not, based on what's going on in our bodies. And this is one of the best, I guess, biological hacks we can start to tap back into because it was always there. Okay, and so this is one of the ways out that members of our group have been discussing, and I think it's a good one. Okay, so all right, so what's happening now? There's a harness that's being created there that does make things easier for people, but you still have to be wary and careful. And so this is where we get to cognitive sovereignty. It's not just about digital sovereignty now, right? It's about how do you keep your mind free in an era where AI is making it so much easier to capture your attention, your cognition, and maybe even your consciousness, right? Because wherever your focus goes and attention goes, that is part of the consciousness that is forming and evolving or devolving, depending on how you look at it, okay? So this is going to become, I think, increasingly important for humanity. All right. Now, if you do want a copy of these slides, just comment in the video below, and I'll happily share them with you. But there are specific tactics here that you can start to implement. And these are things that we are exploring in our own group of conscious technologists. And we have a specific paid lab where you can apply these things in your own local harnesses. Okay, so one of them arguably be better, then this becomes our role for humanity and for human beings in general. All right. If you have any questions or thoughts on everything shared, please put it in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic of AI sycophancy and what's going on in the AI world right now. And look forward to speaking with you in the next video.